Okay, let's 1:30. Let's call the meeting to order. Madam Secretary, could you call the rolls, see if we have a quorum?
Christina Hill.
Here.
Clay Thomas.
Here.
Lee Lawrence. It's absent. Rob Pierce.
Here.
Brad Stanley.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Great, thank you very much. Clay, would you like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Sure. Pledge allegiance
To the flag
flag
The
United States of America, and to the republic
for which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Welcome.
Okay. Is Mr. Large here?
Good morning, Chair Hill. My name is Jennifer Gustafson, and I am filling in for Mr. Large today. He is on vacation, so I'm the DA that sits with the Planning Commission, so I'm just covering for today's meeting. And I can certainly go ahead and start with the ethics law announcement. Board members are reminded that if with respect to any matter or any person coming before the board today, you've received a gift or loan, you have a pecuniary interest or commitment in a private capacity, such as a family, employment, business, or similar relationship, you must disclose that gift, loan, interest, or commitment at the time the matter is being considered. And you must abstain from deliberation or voting on the matter if it's clear that the gift, loan, interest, or commitment would materially affect the independence of judgment of a reasonable person. Board members are also reminded that under the Board of Adjustment rules, if you've had any contact outside this meeting with any persons interested in a matter coming before the board, you should disclose the nature of that contact at this meeting.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Lloyd, could you read the appeal procedure?
Will do. Most decisions rendered by the Board of Adjustment are appealable to the Board of County Commissioners. If you disagree with the decision of the Board of Adjustment and you want to appeal its action, you may do so in writing within 10 calendar days from the date that the decision being appealed is reduced to writing, filed with the Secretary of the Board of Adjustment, and mailed to the original applicant in the proceeding being appealed in accordance with Washoe County Code. Please call the planning staff immediately at 328-6100 for information on the appeal procedure and the application fee.
Thank you. Now we have public comment. Any person is invited to speak on any item on or off the agenda during this period. Madam Secretary, do we have anybody wishing to speak at this time?
I have two people with their hand up. I think that they are here for the item 8A, which is the Summit Church Tower. I will promote them at that time. Please leave your hand up if you are wanting to speak during public comment. Okay, I have two hands up. One is Buzz Lynn. I think he's a applicant representative, but I'll go ahead and let him speak.
Good afternoon, everybody. Are you able to hear me at this point? This is Buzz.
Yes.
Great. I don't know if I've got a visual on screen or not either, but yeah, I have no public comment to make at this time, but I did want to be sure that I could be recognized in front of the board following the staff presentation.
Yes, you are, and I will promote you to the panelist as soon as your item comes up. Thank
Perfect.
you.
Thank you.
So that's it.
I have Chris Winslow.
Yes, I'm the executive pastor at Summit Christian Church, and again, at that time, you can promote, and I will be able to speak on
Thank
Summit.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. approval of agenda. We need a motion to approve the agenda.
This is Rob. I'll make a motion to approve as it is written.
Any seconds?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Madam Chair, for a point of clarification, that was me, Clay Thomas, that seconded the motion.
Okay, thank you. Now, approval of minutes from previous meeting. I have a couple of changes to those minutes. Where'd you go, Rana? I noticed you
Still
didn't
here.
type them, so, okay. On page 3 of 7, about a quarter of the way down, it says the existing home encounter more built in 1936. I don't know what that means, but it doesn't make sense. And then a little, about 6 lines down below that, it says allows cottage to have a slightly larger sleeping space while maintaining. That's kind of a repetitive statement there. Take out as maintaining. And then at the last line of that page, it says Cherry Hill said it would go through the State Historical Preservation Office. It's historic. It's not historical.
Okay.
And then on page 5 of 7, in the 3rd paragraph, the 4th line down, it says the county of Crossbow Road ends at the terminus. That does not make sense. I'm not sure what was said there.
I listened to that multiple times and that did come out like that, but.
Oh,
I'll
really?
listen again, yes.
Okay. Okay. And so with those corrections, could we get a motion to approve the draft meeting minutes of the last meeting?
This is Rob. I'll make a motion to approve.
Any second?
Chair, this is Clay Thomas. I'll second that.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, great. Now for the public hearing. Number 8A, special permit case number WSUP 20-0011 Summit Church Tower. And Dan Killane, is he available for a presentation?
This is Rob, board member Rob. I want to let everybody know that I know the applicant of the grounds. I don't know anybody in Verizon, but I do know the applicant of the Summit Christian Church.
That would be the property owner.
Correct.
Okay.
Mr. Pierce, could you just explain a little bit more for the record how you know the applicant and whether you believe that you knowing the applicant would affect your determination on this case in any way?
I don't feel it will affect my determination in any way, shape, or form. I've had coffee with the gentleman before, and we've discussed some other items, but we have not discussed this that I'm aware of.
Okay, and to clarify, he's actually the property owner, not the applicant.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, then. Guess you won't have to recuse yourself then. So we'll go ahead with the staff presentation. Dan, are you there?
I am here. Can you see my screen?
Yes, I can.
All right. Dan Colon for the record, Washoe County Planning. I have before you today WSUP 20-0011 with Summit Church Tower. So the applicant is requesting to establish a wireless facility within a 70-foot 75-foot tall faux water tower. They're also requesting to vary their landscaping standards. And this is on a parcel that is zoned public and semi-public facility. So this originally came in last summer as a 16-foot high faux rock. It did get all the way through the CAB, who voted unanimously in favor of it. However, it was pulled before it came to the Board of Adjustment because the landowner wanted to go a different direction with the tower design. So now we have a presentation for you today. So here's the vicinity of the proposed project. It is on the property of Summit Church. If we zoom in, you can see it's on the southwest corner of the property, southwest on the hill from the church. And here's even more zoomed in where you can see that the equipment cabinets and the actual proposed faux water tower. Here's the elevations of the proposed faux water tower, which is 75 feet height. And here is the before and after coverage maps that were provided as part of the application. As you can see, green means better signal, gray means worse signal. So as you can see here, we go from having a large swath of gray to having it primarily turned into green, meaning improved cellular communication facilities for Verizon. And now I will show you all of the photo simulations. So there are 5, one starting up on Pyramid Highway, then moving down into the parking lot of the church, then into the neighborhood south of the site, as well as across the street from Pyramid Highway, and then finally on the southbound intake slip for the church itself. So as you can see here, we move from having some water towers to adding an additional water tower. From the parking lot of the church, we go from adding a water tower over here. And then from the neighborhood, immediately south of the parcel, we have the addition of the water tower, as well as across the street from the parcel, the addition of the proposed full water tower. And finally, from the parking lot of some church, the proposed full water tower. Now we're going to just move into the analysis of this. We start off with the allowable uses under Article 302 and 304. Communication facility use types are permissible within the requirements as outlined in 324, which basically allows for the establishment of cellular facilities with an approved SUP in public and semi-public facilities zoning. I provided a table with the maximum height calculations as outlined under 110, 324, 50E1 and 3. So what that basically does is, here we have the 65 feet that is allowable max height for the public and semi-public facilities regulatory zone under subsection 1 allows for an additional 10 feet for any monopole. And then if you have a stealth design, you get an additional 25% on top of that. So what we have here is that the proposed facility is 75 feet, which is the max monopole height, even though it would technically be considered a stealth design and be eligible for up to 93.75 feet. So on to Article 406, which is building placement standards. The application meets the required setback and height requirements. Setbacks for public and semi-public facility are 20 feet from the front and rear and 15 feet from the side. The height is 65 feet. However, we just dealt with that under Article 324, which leads us to landscaping, which is under Article 412. The applicant is requesting to vary all landscaping standards that are required under 110, 412, 40. However, staff does not believe that adjoining yards and landscape residential buffers apply, as the developed land area does not actually abut a residential use. The developed area is 30 feet from the property line. However, all required screening as dictated under Article 324 and 412 is still required. And the applicant is providing a 7-foot tall tan slatted chain link fence in order to screen the facility. As you can see here, the actual facility and developed area is approximately 30 feet away from the southern property line, which is where residential uses are located. And we have to the west some water towers already in existence. So with that, the request to vary landscaping is effectively to waive the requirement to landscape 20% of the developed land area. The total developed land area is approximately 300 square feet. So 20% of that is 80 square feet. Based on current landscaping code, that would require up to 1 tree and up to 2 shrubs. Staff doesn't think that this actually fits into the native vegetation, and the requirement to irrigate this in order to establish it seems excessive, and therefore staff recommends waiving the 20% landscaping within the staff report. However, all areas that are disturbed still need to be revegetated under Article 412 and 438, as well as all the screening is still required as dictated under Article 324 and 412. Article 438, the applicant is proposing to put a road to service the cellular facility. This amounts to about 13,600 square feet of grading with 70 cubic yards of cut, 780 cubic yards of fill. That's primarily the access driveway. It doesn't trigger any major grading, so the applicant is just required to meet code under Article 438, coming for a grading permit. So notice on this application was sent to 115 affected property owners, 500 feet from the site, as you can see on the graphic to the right. And the proposed project was scheduled for March 3rd CAB meeting in front of the Spanish Springs CAB. However, the CAB lacked a quorum, so there was no presentation provided. However, staff did receive a worksheet stating that the proposed faux water tank was an eyesore from the CAB chair. And with that, staff is able to make all 5 of the normal special use permit requirements, as well as the additional 3 findings required under Article 324. And therefore recommends that the Board of Adjustment approve the special use permit WSUP 20-0011 with the conditions approved. And I provided a possible motion for your convenience, and I'm available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Is the applicant want to make a presentation?
I believe the applicant is here. Buzz is here. However, he does not have a presentation. He would like to be available for any questions.
Are there any questions for the applicant?
Yes, Madam Chair. I have a question.
Go ahead, Mr. Stanley.
I noticed in our package that this, in a little bit of memory, I noticed this this particular application had come before us earlier in time, and in that package it showed that the CAB endorsement of this, or acceptance, or move to approve of this proposal was unanimous. Were there changes between that presentation and the current situation?
Dan, I see you raising your hand. This is Buzz. I can respond to that, or you can. I'm fine either way.
I'll let you respond to it.
That's fine. Mr. Stanley, this is Buzz Lynn, Epic Wireless, the applicant. And we did change the design of it at the request of Mr. Winslow at the church, strictly based on the idea that the 16-foot rock turned out to be not as nice to look at. And we, after a number of iterations of what else could we do, their original design was for us to do a water tower. And we had resisted that only because we felt like that if AT&T had a rock, a fake rock, that we should have one too, just to remain consistent. However, the height of that rock proved not to work well, and unfortunately, the materials were not something that the church considered appropriate for the location that we had to place it, based on AT&T's existing rock. Therefore, we went back after a couple of iterations to the water tower design that the church had originally requested.
And if I may ask a follow-up to that, to Mr. Lynn, do you know, or would you assume that's the reason the change in design is the reason that the chair of the cab for that area now does not, I think his remark was that it's an eyesore?
Yeah, I can't speculate as to why he changed his mind on it, but if he liked the rock but didn't like the water tower, it's perfectly within his prerogative to have a change of mind, although we certainly think it's attractive.
So that was the change then?
That was the change, yeah. There was a minor change in location only because the water tower structure was not appropriate in the rock location where we originally were. So we did end up moving that closer to the water tanks in order to be there next to them.
So in summary, it was a move and a different type of faux look.
Correct.
All right, thank you.
I do also want to clarify, this did not go to the Board of Adjustment for hearing. It was postponed at the request of the applicant prior to actually coming before this board last, I believe, August. So I just want to make that very clear.
Okay.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
Ms. Clay Thomas, I have a couple questions for Mr. Lynn, if I may.
go ahead.
Mr. Lynn, just for a point of edification here, are you saying that there already is a fake rock on site being used by another company?
That's correct.
And is the dimensions of that rock around the same that this rock would have been?
No, the rock that Verizon was proposing here would have had to be much taller in order to gain the altitude necessary to propagate the signals for good coverage.
So if you went with the 16-foot rock as originally proposed, you would not have the amount of coverage that is that the map supplied in the packet shows now. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes, the map in the packet is accurate.
Then why was a 16-foot rock proposed in the first place?
It was proposed to remain consistent with the existing rock that was there, and that change resulted as a comment. And I should probably ask Mr. Winslow to join me on this, because ultimately it was the church's decision in the end that it probably was not an appropriate placement after looking at it, seeing the materials design, and the colors that were with it. The other thing that entered the equation here too is that the original proposal was in fact a 16-foot rock. However, I'd also point out that that rock size ultimately needed to increase because the 16 feet turned out not to be adequate. So we thought, well, let's try 20. And ultimately, the radio engineer said, you know, this really just doesn't work for us. And Chris Winslow at the church agreed and said, too big of a rock and too flat of an area, unattractive. Let's go back to a different plan. I don't want to speak for him because obviously he's the gentleman who ultimately made the decision on behalf of the church that they really did want to see a change, and that was what drove the change. So I'd let him speak to that.
Yes, and if I may, the reason for making the change, again, the existing rock that was there is smaller, not quite as intrusive. And so being on church property, we didn't necessarily want antennas to gain attraction. We actually have one antenna that's a nice cross, which is appropriate for us. So I want to commend Buzz Lynn and Epic Wireless because they worked with us for 18 months to dial in the aesthetic that we were looking for. The 16 and then the 20-foot rocks actually ended up being pretty monolithic, which would not really be very attractive for a church property. So we got the idea of basically looking at the water tower over at Red Hawk, and there are similar water towers at Arrow Creek. And we believe that that provides a nice aesthetic for the church. And the location, in essence, tucked over there by the existing Tuma water towers, it's not really an eyesore because you already have two eyesores bigger than the one that's going in right behind it. So we felt that that's a safe place to put it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions for the applicants? Seeing none, is there any public comment, Madam Secretary?
I don't see any hands raised for public comment.
Okay, then we'll bring it back to the Board of Adjustments for discussion and comment.
This is Rob. I'm all for having better coverage for the people of Washoe County. And I have seen these water towers and I've never seen this design before, but I think it's going to look good personally. If it's going to be modeled after Red Hawk and places like that, I think it's not going to be an eyesore. I would fully support this.
Great, thanks.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Thomas, go ahead.
Thank you. You know, I concur that looking at the coverage map, it's advantageous for the whole community there to have that. And it really is a wide area that's now covered, which I like. My concern, to be honest with you, is going through the photo simulations, what I don't like is from just about every position, I believe, except number 4 is the least. The tower stands way above the horizon compared to the other items there, and to me that does break up the horizon, which I know in the past we've attempted to avoid and to draw at the least amount of attention to items that go up that will detract from the area like that. So that's my concern. The coverage, absolutely. But like I said, on all the photo simulations, it just stands out. It's 75 feet above the rest of the items that are there. Thank you.
Point is valid. Thank you. Is there any
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Essentially the same point. I'm concerned that, and I appreciate the applicant's point of view. I appreciate, as we all do, getting better cell coverage for various reasons. But it does, theoretically, from the marketing photos and representations, it breaks the skyline in every case, and breaks the ridgeline, and that's kind of fun. I think it's really odd, maybe just the angle that is so substantially taller and more prominent than the cross. But my main concern, again, is the fact that the chair, I believe, of the CAB was not supportive of the look. No comment from him on the project itself. And again, having read the package or part of the package or the synopsis of the package from the last CAB meeting when it was produced, it was unanimous in approval. And now that with the changes, there seems to be some dissent. So I'm concerned about not whether or not it's a water tower, but just the height of it and the angle breaking the ridge line and the horizon.
Okay. Does the applicant want to chime in on that? Does it have to be that tall? Can it be shorter?
The short answer is maybe, but I would point out, and thank you for the opportunity to address the question. I know that this was designed to be conversation amongst the board, so thank you for allowing me an opportunity to mention it here. But we did design this tower on purpose with additional height in order to accommodate a co-location carrier, which is the county's desire. So if the county were interested in a lower height, the ability to co-locate would go away, and yes, we could reduce the height. So the height can be brought down if the co-location requirement is willing to be, I'm not going to use the word overlooked, but if you would make the accommodation in this case to decide that the aesthetic is more important than the co-location, then yes, we could reduce the height. But we did design it with the county's desire for co-location in mind. The other thing too, this may or may not make a difference, the cab chair's comment that it was ugly was also mentioned, or it was mentioned that the color was really the outstanding feature. So if the color, if the board would see that the tan is not what you want, but white like the other water tanks, yes, that could be accommodated too, or it could be made the color of a lightish blue sky behind. The point is that the color can also be changed. And so I wanted to point that out as well. And that's really it in a nutshell. Does that address at least that part of the question? Yes, it can come down, but it's a function of co-location going away.
Thank you. Dan, can you explain what's co-location?
Co-location is the ability to put a second array of antenna on the same tower. So
From a different company?
From a different company, the same company, just a second array as opposed to having just the one array. It means that instead of having to put a second tower up in order to accommodate more cell towers over there, they would just be able to co-locate on the existing tower.
Okay.
Which is,
I think that's an important function.
that's at your discretion.
Yeah.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
If I may, was the original rock design, did it meet co-location parameters?
It did not. And it did not require co-location because all of the other carriers are already up there. T-Mobile is on the cross, AT&T is on a rock, Sprint is actually at the Tumwa Water Tower, and that was a consideration as part of our co-location search. However, that could not work because Tumwa informed us that at some point, less than 5 years, they were planning to no longer utilize that water tank and it would become a surplus property, so they were not interested in our presence there. And Sprint will have to relocate at some point there too. So we have Sprint, AT&T, and T-Mobile already there, and Verizon is not present on the Hill yet. And hence we provided the co-location for Sprint or whomever. Maybe there ultimately ends up being another carrier, we don't know. But somebody would join us on that tower.
Okay. I would just say that's better than another tower.
Yeah,
So,
Madam Chair, this is Rob.
yes.
I don't know. I know that I've driven by the location, and Pyramid Highway is extremely, elevation-wise, it's a lot lower than this is. So I think the pictures we might be looking at might be a different illusion. I would assume that if the closer you get to where this proposed water tower would be, the nicer it would look. That's just an assumption on my part. But just looking at the pictures, it looks like it's going to mess up the horizon, but it doesn't appear to me from being at that location that it would. But that's just my 2 bits.
Well, I appreciate that because I've never even been up Pyramid Highway. Okay, great. Any more comments from staff?
Madam Chair, this is Clay,
I mean, the board?
Madam Chair, this is Clay Thomas. I have some more questions, please. First of all, Dan, back to you, that in the case description, it also says that there's going to be 9 ground-mounted antennas at that location. Is that correct? So there'll be, in addition to the tower, there'll be 9 ground-mounted antennas?
Are we looking at the original application or the subsequent one that's now before the board?
I'm looking at the one that I received 2 days ago, and under case description, it says consisting of 9 ground-mounted antennas and antenna equipment within a 75-foot tall faux water tower.
No, I forgot to delete ground. That's on me. I'm sorry.
So there's no ground
No.
towers. Okay, so we're only addressing a 75-foot tower.
That is my understanding, correct.
Thank you. And my question back to Mr. Lin, what would be the minimum height that you could go for this tower that would be acceptable?
It's a difficult number to answer, but let me present it as such that the lower the height gets at some point, we don't know where that is because there is a gradient of signal degradation that goes down with each foot. At what point does Verizon say that's enough? I don't have an exact answer to that, but I do know that without the stealth, we would be able to go to 65 feet and it should not present a problem. If the board would prefer that it go down to 55 feet, I think we can make that as well, but the co-location function would definitely go away at that point. So with the other carriers there already, if you would like to see us at 55 feet, we could reduce it to that height and it would simply not have another carrier space available. So if 55 feet becomes a condition of approval, I know that would work for them. How much lower, that's a judgment call on a sliding scale by the client. I don't know.
And I'll just tag on to that. What we don't have in front of us is really what the Sprint coverage, I guess, is in that area right now. Then that's one we would think that they would be a co-carrier.
Yeah, that would ultimately be the co-location carrier. I'd point out too that this is sort of inside industry things that people pay attention to, but the outer public does not, and that is that Sprint and T-Mobile have merged. And at some point, one of those antenna arrays will go away. It would be pure speculation for me to guess which one. I have a pretty good idea, but I don't want to be on record as calling it and then ultimately being wrong.
Yeah, we don't want to hold you to that, so.
Thank you. Let's just say that we all know that the water tanks ultimately will have to go away. And just from industry experience, I would say that T-Mobile would be the remaining carrier.
Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr. Thomas?
Mr. Stanley.
Mr. Stanley?
No problem. I have a question.
You're not on my panel here. I can't see you.
No, I know. I'm the fellow with the name Brad Stanley. Mr. Lynn, a question for you, please. How tall was the original rock bow tower?
The original rock ultimately ended up being required at 24 feet.
And
However,
what was the coverage there, please?
the coverage there would have been very similar to what we're proposing here.
Okay, so when we're talking about height, at 24, that particular configuration achieved similar results.
It did, and yes, I think I can anticipate where you might be going with that. The presence on the hill where the rock was ultimately pretty close to the church by comparison to where this is. So a taller structure to appear to be a legitimate water tank really should be moved back to where the other water tanks are. And again, I'll point out the color, that if you'd like it to be white to match those other tanks, we would be perfectly fine with that.
I appreciate that. My concern is really similar, I think, to Mr. Thomas. I don't want to speak for him, but and that is the breaking of the ridge line on the horizon. That's probably my primary concern, and the fact that the CAB member made the remark that they made and went out of their way to make that remark.
I do wish we could have attended or actually held a presentation at the CAB hearing. Unfortunately, without the quorum, we were not able to show it.
Yes, that would have been beneficial, I agree.
Okay, any more questions or comments from the board? Okay, I guess I never closed the public hearing, so that's closed. Should someone like to make a motion?
Madam Chair, this is Rob. I'll make a motion.
Okay.
I would like to move to approve with the conditions. I move that after given reasonable consideration of the information contained in the staff report and information received during the public hearing, the Washoe County Board of Adjustments approve with conditions: 1, special use permit case number WSUP 20-0011 for Verizon Wireless, and 2, the request to vary standards with the conditions within Exhibit A, having made all 5 findings in accordance with Washoe County Code Section 110.810.30 and Section 110.324.75.
Anybody want a second?
Madam Chair, for point of clarification, is that with any reduction in the tower height, or is that going forward just as the way the application has submitted it?
My motion is just for the way that it is for reception coverage. It's my understanding the higher you get, the better reception coverage you get.
That is correct.
So it's the way it is proposed and recommended to be approved by staff, so.
Correct.
Any second? I will second the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
Aye.
Opposed?
It looks like a tie vote. So should we, Mr. Lloyd, can you?
Yeah. Would any of the board members care to make another motion? And maybe, and Jen, maybe you need to jump in here, but maybe we could ask the applicant if they would be willing to, I don't know, compromise a lower pole. I don't know.
Yes, we would be willing to do that. So if the motion could be restated as a 55-foot, we could do that. And if that makes it more approvable for one of the other members, we would do that. We could meet that condition of approval, yes.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Well, we've had situations like this before. Someone, usually me, has asked the DDA sitting in about, or Trevor, about the process of how we would postpone this application so that it could go back through, and postpone is the typical word being used, but so it could go back through the CAD process. I think Mr. Lynn mentioned that would be a good idea, and he wished it were true. We have an earlier presentation, as I understand it, of this to the CAB, which got great approval, and there's some variations, and so some changes were made, and it sounds like there's some good reasons. and certainly the applicant's reason. But what would be the process for, and what is the appetite of the board to postpone this application so that it can go through the full process and go back through the cap?
Mr. Stanley, this is Trevor Lloyd.
Hi, Trevor.
The video on. Yeah, my recollection is that this was scheduled for the CAB meeting, and to no fault of the applicant, the CAB did not have a quorum. And so I don't know that we would want to punish an applicant simply because a CAB failed to meet the obligations of having a quorum. Secondly, a postponement, my understanding is that if this board chooses to seek a postponement, you would need to get the authorization or approval from the applicant to do so. They are under a state mandated time frame, or we are under a state mandated time frame to hold this hearing. And so there needs to be a decision made one way or the other, either approval or denial. Postponement is not one of the options.
Madam Chair, this is Clay Thomas. May I step in
Yes,
here?
Mr. Thomas, go ahead. Would you change your vote if it was 55 feet?
Well, thank you. I appreciate the time or the opportunity to talk. First of all, Mr. Lynn, thank you for your input on this matter and your willingness basically to adjust the height of that tower. I do think that coverage is extremely important out there, both for public safety and just for for ease of use. I do have a concern with the visual impact out there, but I believe a reduction in 20 feet down to 55 feet, if in fact you can still get the same coverage, I would support a item like that.
Thank you. We appreciate that.
Thank you.
Dan?
Maybe this is more of a question for Jen, but I believe the regulatory height requirement for PSP is 65 feet in height. I'm not sure what the board is able to vary within what is already acceptable in height by right.
Dan, I think you're saying that by right, under the development code, the
Yes.
applicant has a right to have a tower that's 65 feet tall.
Or structure.
A structure, right, under the development code.
Yes.
And your point is well taken, because that is, as of right, the height that they can have.
But they're proposing 75 feet.
Exactly.
So they're coming down 20 feet. And it says, it wouldn't be a hardship for them, wouldn't create a hardship, right?
Correct.
So,
Yes, I mean, if the applicant is willing to stipulate that, yes, they're willing to have a tower that's 55 feet and that still meets their needs, and they're willing to essentially amend the application for a 55-foot tower, then they can do that. I think Dan's point, though, was that under the development code, they have, as of right, up to 65 feet. And so the question of whether this board can mandate that is a good question, given the allowances in the development code.
yeah, I understand that, but
Madam Chair,
yes, Mr. Stanley?
a question for Ms. Gustafson. When you say has the right, does that mean have the obligation or has the requirement, or simply that they have the right and they can pursue that right, or they can amend that right at their choice?
I would say the latter. The development code allows structures up to 65 feet in the PSP regulatory zone. So that's what is referred to as an allowance as of right in the development code. However, yes, if the applicant says, no, we would prefer to have a 55-foot structure because we would like to, follow this board's direction, the applicant can do that. The applicant doesn't have to build something that's at the maximum of the allowance under the development code.
Thank you.
May I make a comment on that?
Yes.
obviously, we came into this with the application at 75 feet, which is also allowed under the development code, as Ms. Gustafson has pointed out. And it is also allowed at 65 feet where there no stealthing required. However, under the circumstances, realizing that the height is really becoming the critical issue here in the discussion, and that Verizon has the ability to go to 55 feet, we would be accepting of that in this case. Otherwise, we would simply be asking for the right to build what is allowed under the code, and we are compliant with that. So if 55 feet is the only way that this site could get approved, I would say that we could do that and abide by it. Although we do appreciate staff pointing out that while 65 is allowed, we need not necessarily follow it. So ultimately it becomes a board decision to go with 75 or 65 or 55, all of which would be acceptable. So you all get to pick for us is what it comes down to.
Great, thank you.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Mr. Thomas?
Yeah, I'm just, Mr. Lynn, if what I hear you saying is correct, is that, yes, you have that option. And by law, it can go up to the 65, 75 foot, but you believe under these set of circumstances, you can work within 55 feet, and basically taking you at your word, you believe that a tower at 55 feet would be sufficient for this, for the approval of this project. Is that what I'm hearing you saying?
That is 100% correct, yes.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate that as well.
Okay. Mr. Pierce, would you like to amend your motion?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. So I make a motion to approve with conditions. I move that after giving reasonable consideration of the information obtained in the staff report and information received during the public hearing, the Washington County Board of Adjustments approve with conditions 55-foot maximum height, special use permit case number WSUP 20-0011 for Verizon Wireless, and 3, the request to vary standards with the condition within Exhibit A, having made all 5 findings in accordance with Washoe County Code Section 110.810.30 and Section 110.324.75.
Okay, thank you. All in favor?
Well, Madam Chair, I'll second that.
Oh, second. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion unanimously approved.
Thank you all very much. Really appreciate the time. Chris, thank you for joining on the call. Trevor, thanks for your comments. Dan, thank you too. And Mr. Pierce especially, thanks for spearheading this. That was great. Thanks all.
Thank you. Okay, moving on. Second project on the agenda. Special use permit case number WSUP 21-0003, Cooper Grading. Do we have the Julie Olander?
Yeah. Hi, Madam Chair, this is Trevor Lloyd. I will be filling in for Julie, who is on vacation today.
Okay, great.
Are you seeing my full screen?
Yes, we are.
Oh, good. Okay. Let me just back up. And am I coming in loud and clear? I want to make sure you can all hear me well enough.
Yes.
Great. Then I'll go ahead and get started. All right. This item before you this afternoon is a special use permit, case number WSUP 21-0003, the Cooper Grading request for possible hearing, discussion, and possible action to approve a special use permit for major grading on a parcel with a slope of 15% or more and is more than 6 acres in size on an area approximately 46,000 square feet with 3,900 cubic yards of cuts and 2,900 cubic yards of fill, and a driveway that traverses 30% slope to facilitate the construction of a new single-family residence and detached garage. Subject property is located approximately 1,100 feet from the intersection of El Molina and La Mancha Drive in East Spanish Springs, in the Spanish Springs area plan. The applicants requested a variance and an abandonment back in 2019 to support the construction on this property. These items went before the Planning Commission, who approved the abandonment but denied the variance. This background information is specifically important because of the denial of the variance, which now necessitates the need to access another location that's on higher ground on this property. All right, the special use permit is triggered or is necessitated as it meets the threshold for major grading for a number of reasons. The first of which is that the grading exceeds 10% of the area on a property that's over 6 acres in size. Also, excavation of over 1,000 cubic yards of material basically on slopes that are greater than 15%. Also, the driveway up to the higher ground traverses over 30% slope, which also triggers the need for a special use permit. All right, on this overhead, you do see the overall parcel, and the proposed grading will occur along the southern boundary of this property. Let's see, the next slide is a blow-up of the grading proposed. Along the front portion of the property at the southwest corner is where the proposed residence will be located. And more towards the southeast portion of the property will be the location of the parking pad. I'm sorry, the garage pad. The proposed grading will meet all grading requirements of Article 438. Let's see, and Washoe County, the conditions require mitigation of the site, a noxious weed control plan, as well as limiting the hours of construction to 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Mondays through Saturdays. This graphic shows it's a slope analysis graphic that shows slopes that exceed 30%. All of the area in red shows that the slopes are very steep on this site. Obviously, this is a very constrained piece of property, and for this reason, along the eastern portion of the property, some more gradual slopes that's more appropriate for development. And the rationale, the reason for the needed access to that portion of the property. So just the overall request, the applicant is proposing to grade approximately 46,000 square feet of the site. That includes 3,900 cubic yards of cut, 2,900 cubic yards of fill, and about 1,000 cubic yards to be deposited on another location on the site. The driveway from the main residence to the detached garage will traverse slopes of 30% or greater. This item was sent to the Citizen Advisory Board and was scheduled for the March 3rd meeting. However, there was no quorum and the meeting was subsequently canceled. We did receive one comment from a CAB member. However, that CAB member had no concerns with the request. This special use permit was appropriately noticed. 32 parcels were noticed with a general area of 1,700 feet from the site were included in the noticing. Staff believes that all of the 5 findings can be made and is recommending approval of the special use permit and offers the following motion for your consideration. That concludes my presentation, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have at this time.
Madam Chair, I have a question for Mr. Lloyd.
Go ahead, Mr. Stanley.
Thank you. Trevor, I know you just kind of picked this up and are filling in. I appreciate that. About how far away is the nearest current residence? The estimate is good.
There's a residence, let's see, it's basically surrounded on multiple sides by existing residences, as you can see by this this overhead graphic. It's a current rural residential development.
Sure. I was just wondering about the number of feet for sound, because in the past we've been kind of limiting the weekend times of the hours of construction. And I didn't know if this would be an exception, because it looks like it's a fairly long ways to the nearest neighbor.
Yeah, I do know that sound carries quite a bit in these rural areas. And I think for that reason, there is a recommended condition that limits the hours of construction, Monday through Saturday, 7 to 7.
Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know where Ms. Hill went, but I will step in until she comes back.
It seems that she's dropped off. Christina has dropped off.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Secretary, for that. Let us know when she comes back on, please. Mr. Lloyd, I know you picked this up at just at the 11th hour. I did have a couple questions that I left on Ms. Olander's voicemail, and usually she's very good about getting back to me, and obviously if she's on vacation, I understand why she didn't. But my questions to you then are, according to the documents, that the garage is going to be larger than the residence. It says on page, I can pull it up here, I think the house was between 3,000 to 3,500 square feet, and the garage is listed at 4,000 square feet. It would be on page 6 of 9, third paragraph from the bottom, I believe. So my question is since the garage is actually bigger than the house, does that require another special use permit?
It may require an administrative permit. Keep in mind that what we look at the footprint of each structure. So it's not just the habitable space that we're looking at. So that might be a little misleading. If the footprint of the main residence with attached garage or other structures that are part of the footprint, if that is in fact smaller than the proposed garage, yes, it will likely require an administrative permit. But the applicant, I believe, they should be on the line and can answer that question.
Right. I guess for my own clarification, though, that what I was asking is if in fact the garage is going to be larger than the main residence, does that actually require an additional SUP? Because I know,
and that would be, yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
And it would require an administrative permit, not a special use permit.
Right. Okay. And my other question, and I seriously doubt you can answer this, but within the documentation, the driveway to the garage is a 30 plus grade. And I was going through the responses. The Truckee Meadows Fire Protection District had no comment on this project, but I thought on such given slopes that they actually have set limits that the road has to be so wide to get their trucks up to a certain location, and there has to be an actual turnaround for their trucks. So I don't know if you're the right one that should be answering this, but I know in the past when we've had steep slopes, there have been issues, and the fire district basically has stepped in and said, no, the driveway has to be so wide to get a truck up there, and there has to be a place to actually turn around, and it has to be so big. And I just didn't see it in this in this package. So,
Right. There is, with any residential driveway, there is a maximum grade that cannot be exceeded. And I don't believe that the grade is 30%. I know that they're traversing 30% current native or natural slope, but and maybe the applicant can answer that. Unfortunately, it's not included on this site plan. So I would ask that the applicant answer that question. What is the grade of the proposed driveway?
thank you.
Everybody, this is Ryan Switzer, with Robinson Engineering, the applicant's representative and the civil engineer for the project that put these plans together. And yeah, those are valid questions. Trevor, if you could go back one slide, I believe there is some slope labels, and it's, I know, obviously tough for everybody to see this on the shared screen, but you were correct, Trevor. The traversed slope is 30%, but the driveway itself at the bottom is actually at 9.6% downhill. And so the maximum in Washoe County, I believe, according to the fire department, to have an unpaved driveway is 10%. We deliberately stayed below that threshold at 9.6. And now actually that you're zoomed in, it is also hard to see, but there's an International Fire Code approved incorporated into the driveway design. It looks like a hammerhead, and it's very difficult to see, but that has been incorporated into the design as well. It's likely why the fire department, I'm assuming, didn't provide any comments. We were careful to make sure to adhere to their codes. So, and I'm happy to answer other questions related to the grading. I've been listening in, and sorry for not chiming in earlier.
Well, Mr. Switzer, thank you very much for clarifying that for me. So,
Mr. Thomas, I have a question, please.
go ahead, Mr. Stanley.
That's good news on the hammerhead, excellent news on the traverse. And the 9.6 is, as you say, gives you clearance under 10. What is the width, and this is for my information, what is the width of the driveway, please?
We're proposing a 20-foot wide driveway, and that also falls within International Fire Code for residential driveway needing a turnaround at the end with the hammerhead. So 20 feet.
Is the requirement 20 or?
Yes, I believe that's the minimum threshold. And as you can see on the left side of the screen, it is a little tight with the house. Well, so this is a preliminary residence footprint that we were working with, but the dashed lines, you can see the setbacks, and we're pretty limited to how much space we have due to the setbacks, the variance not being approved, I guess I should say. So we've got quite a large building pad, but that dashed line that's running north-south on the west side of the residence is limiting us to the east side of the pad, and that's why we limited the driveway width to 20 feet currently.
Thank you.
Okay. We've kind of intermixed this a little bit. I know we were originally asking questions of staff. Are there any other questions from the board members for staff? Hearing none, I know the applicant is present, and I know he's already spoke, Mr. Switzer. Do you have anything or a presentation that you would like to present?
We did, but I would say that staff covered everything adequately. The only thing I would like to add is that we are willing to, with the 1,000 yards of export that is currently shown with this design, this was preliminary in nature, and the applicant, the Cooper family, are willing to kind of adjust grading plans such that the export remains on site and would be feathered into this proposed grading plan. So the entire north side of this grading plan is all on fill slopes, and they are currently at 3-to-1. If we feathered those out to say 4-to-1 or 5-to-1, that remaining export could be dispersed of on site fairly easily and basically balance all of the earthwork on site without needing to export anything off site. So that'd be the one thing I'd add. And other than that, we're open to questions.
Thank you. Are there any additional questions for this gentleman? I do have one real quick. Is the garage going to be larger than the house? That's what's anticipated, or have you gotten there yet that you can decide that for us?
I believe Jimmy Cooper, the actual applicant, is on the line as well, but speaking on his behalf right now, I would say the garage proposed is actually 3,000 square feet and the house is 3,500. So the garage would be less in square footage than the house, and we would not be applying for the administrative permit that Trevor mentioned. But if that case were to change, we'd be willing to submit the administrative permit, but at this time, we don't anticipate that happening.
Yes, you are correct, Ryan. The garage will be smaller than the house.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Cooper. I appreciate that. Are there any other additional questions for the applicant or his representative? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and close that. Madam Secretary, is there anyone from the public wishing to speak on this matter?
I have someone named Sue Long. I don't know if she's part of the applicant representative for this item or if she's public comment.
Okay. Thank you.
So I'm supposing that she's public comment because nobody's saying that they have heard of her. So I will go ahead and set the timer and let her speak.
Thank you. I also noticed that our chairwoman is back, so we'll defer to her. Welcome back, Ms. Hill.
Thank you. I don't know. All of a sudden, when Trevor was talking, it froze and I lost it and left the meeting and tried to come back and it wouldn't let me in. And that was a little frustrating, but I'm back. Thank you. So, yeah, if that person wants to give public comment.
Sue Long, would you like to speak? Go ahead and unmute.
I'm sorry, am I unmuted now?
Yes.
Yeah.
There you go. Sue Long?
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah. There we go. Can you hear me now? Okay, great. Sue is not available. I've been sitting in. I'm Robert Long. We're neighbors to the proposal here. We're not too far away. We're up on La Mancha. Robert and Susan Long. We just have a question. Do you, what is the distance from the garage to the house?
Actually, sir, I'll go ahead and break in. This is actually a time for public comment. You have 3 minutes to make comment. It's not a time for question and answers.
Okay, well then never mind. Thank you.
Okay. So where are we? We had the staff presentation. We had questions for the applicant. Now we have public comment. It doesn't appear there is any more public comment, right, Recording Secretary?
We have no more public comment.
Okay. So we'll bring it back to the board and for discussion and comments.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
if I may, I have a question for Mr. Lloyd.
Okay, Mr. Stanley, go ahead.
Mr. Lloyd, what's the approximate distance between the residence and the garage?
Sorry, Mr. Stanley, I think you were breaking up. Can you repeat that?
What is the approximate distance between the residence and the garage? Please.
Okay, I'll have to bring up the, I'll share my screen again. Well, let's see. Given the fact that I'm looking at 50 feet there, approximate, and the applicant could probably give a much more accurate description, but that's probably 300, 400 feet, right around that range.
Thank you.
Yes, that would be my best guess. But do they need to use it?
I don't think we know.
Well, maybe the question is, can you drive? You drive. It's a 20-foot wide driveway between the garage and the residence. So when you're unloading groceries, you're driving up to the residence, right? And there's no garage in the residence, or are there two garages?
No, there's a garage in the residence. That down there is for our fifth wheel boat, our collectible automobiles we collect, ATVs, stuff like that.
Okay, so you're driving really to your residence, and that's just like a storage container.
Yeah, recreational storage, yeah.
Okay. And what's the slope of that, that 300 feet between the garage and the house?
I believe Ryan could probably answer that better. I believe that was 9%.
Oh, that's minimal.
Yeah.
Not bad. Okay. And so I guess the neighbor doesn't have any more public comment now that they know that if they're listening. So is there any other items we'd like to talk about before we entertain a motion? What about the idea of fanning out the graded material on site? Is that something that's acceptable, Trevor, or would they have to get some kind of revision to their application, or instead of exporting 1,000 cubic yards, if they can just spread it around their site there, seems like it would be more desirable.
Right. It's actually a question I asked of the applicant prior to the meeting, and maybe I'll have the applicant discuss that. And he did address that, but I would like maybe a little more clarification from the applicant if we could.
Sure.
Ms. Chair?
Yeah, this is Ryan again. And essentially, the way that the grading plan was shown in the application, we did have 1,000 cubic yards of material that would need to be located either off-site, removed from the site and taken elsewhere, which the applicant would not like to pay for trucking to do that. And with 10 acres of open land and only 1 acre of which being disturbed, we figured we would rather keep that material on site rather than pay to have it leave the site. And this original grading plan has 3-to-1 slopes per Washoe County grading code. That's the steepest we could go. But if we were to lessen those slopes and get 4 or 5-to-1, that fill material could it would disturb a larger area, but we're already across the threshold for area for the SUP, so that we wouldn't need to come back to the board to have for increased area of disturbance. We're also already over 1 acre, so regardless, we're going to need to apply for a stormwater pollution prevention plan from NDEP. To my knowledge, we wouldn't trigger any other additional requirements by having a larger disturbance area by fanning out the grading. So the only benefit would be we wouldn't need to remove material from the site, and we would be able to keep it all contained on the site. Does that help clarify a little bit?
It does, but how would it be stabilized? Are you going to revegetate it or spray something on it that would prevent it from eroding away?
Right. Yes. So I did see one of the conditions of approval is that all disturbed areas need to either be seeded or hydroseeded with approved seed mix by a registered landscape architect, and we're willing to do that. One option that the applicant and I had talked about before or after the application was submitted, but prior to this meeting, was that there is a lot of natural rock on the site, and crushing that up during the grading process and maybe providing slope protection with crushed rock might be a more cost-effective and also just long-term, more economical solution. So we're not watering or having to irrigate any of the seeding that's on the slopes, and just providing rock would fit in more naturally with the landscape as well. I don't know if any of the members of the board were able to make it out to the site, but it is pretty rocky terrain, and feel that rock stabilization might be even a better way to go than seeding. So that's up for discussion.
Madam Chair, just from a planning perspective, we typically encourage reduced slopes, which is what the applicant sounds like they're proposing, reducing from a 3-to-1 down to 4 or even 5-to-1, if I heard that correctly. Stabilization is and re-veg actually takes much better with a more gentle slope. So there is certainly that in that regard, it certainly is supported by staff.
Okay, what about using gravel instead of hydroseed or revegetation? Is that an acceptable method of retention?
I'd have to go back and look at the conditions. I do believe we were asking for re-veg of all disturbed areas, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
So I think from a planning perspective, we'd rather see re-veg than just bare dirt. So I guess maybe we'll bring the applicant back in. Are you proposing just gravel, placing gravel on all these dirt areas? Is that your proposal?
No, it wouldn't be gravel. It would be like 8-inch minus riprap, which you see on a lot of slopes all around and against like freeways embankment and stuff.
Riprap, well, that's a different thing, yeah. I thought you were gonna crush the rock and distribute it or something. But that's an acceptable method of bank stabilization or soil stabilization, is it, or not?
I'd have to go back. Madam Chair, I'm sorry. I don't believe we do allow riprap, but you're saying, I'd have to get the definition. What would be the size of the riprap? You said 8-inch?
Yeah, we can get 8-inch minus. Yeah, because I've got there's even a lot of 3-foot boulders up there. There's just a large amount of rock.
Understood. The problem is code prohibits riprap as slope stabilization. We certainly allow for rock mulch, which is certainly a smaller diameter, and we allow for boulders, but there's a certain size, like the riprap, that is prohibited, at least in certain areas. I believe it has to do with where you're locating on the site. Anything within 100 feet of all property lines, we don't allow riprap. I do believe outside of the 100-foot setback, we can get clarification on this. I think it would be allowed at that point.
Madam Chair, a question for Mr. Lloyd, please. Trevor, does that apply to drainage and waterway areas too? I noticed there was some drainage on this lot, it looked like.
No, those areas, drainage channels and detention facilities and that are excluded, or they're exempted. They can have riprap. In fact, we often encourage it. It's just outside of those areas, just for slope stabilization, riprap is prohibited.
And did I see correctly there were drainage areas? I guess it would be to the north of the construction.
I would ask the applicant that question.
Could you repeat that again, Mr. Stanley, please?
It looked like, do I recall correctly, that there was a drainage area to the north, I think, of the construction that you anticipate?
Correct. There's a large unnamed drainage traversing basically right through the center of the site, running west or east-west through the site.
So and the riprap ordinance or recommendations don't particularly apply to the drainage, so that's the reason I asked the question.
Sorry, one more time, Mr. Stanley.
I was wondering whether or not, since drainage areas allow riprap, if you could dispose of some of your on-site material in that area and still meet code without having to add any re-veg, which could conceivably be seen as a fire issue.
As far as I'm aware, providing excess material into a drainage is not allowed also. It could trigger a whole nother sort of permitting process with the Army Corps and the NPP.
I withdraw the question.
Thank you. To add to the riprap conversation, though, I would say that I did find in section 110.438.50 for cuts in the development code that riprap is prohibited on cut slopes. We're actually not trying to add riprap to our cut slopes. These would be dispersed across our fill slopes, and there is no such restriction on use of riprap on fill slopes. And also, they define riprap between 6-inch and 30-inch diameter rock. So we're right there in the middle. So we're definitely, what we're proposing here is riprap according to the code. But I just wanted to clarify that we're only wanting to use it to stabilize the fill slopes, not the cut slopes. And that seems to be allowed by the code.
My recommendation, rather than, addressing the issue at this point, is just asking the board to require, require that the applicant meet code when they submit the grading plans.
Whether it be revegetation or stabilization or regardless.
In addition to the conditions that are required, yes.
Okay, well, the condition says it has to be revegetated. So would we have to amend that condition?
If, I'd have to look at the condition itself.
It's the last condition on, it just says, all disturbed areas shall be revegetated. Seed mix shall be designed by a licensed landscape architect. And I saw the Story County Conservation District said, had a seed mix and a hydro seed and, all that. Recommendation. So it seems like revegetation. Yeah, the Washoe County Conservation District said requires 3-to-1 slope hydro-seeded with minimum 30 pounds of dry and grass mix until the landscape is planted. Evergreen and deciduous plants, 1/3 planted, are evergreens, and 3-year monitoring plan for the landscape. So that was a little more involved, and all, the planning conditions are just revegetate. So. Right.
And I don't know that where riprap may be allowed by code, I believe there could be a combination of both where they're still meeting the re-veg. And I've seen that, maybe the applicants can speak to that, but I've seen where there has been re-veg in combination with riprap stabilization.
Madam Chair, this is Clay.
Yes, Mr. Thomas?
Yeah, I don't want to get too far afield here of what we're asking and things like that. I tend to agree with Mr. Lloyd that if we make a motion that basically we state that it complies with Washoe County Code, that covers all areas, whether it's riffraff, whether it's revegetation or whatever, they would have to comply with the code. So we're not making any special amendments. We're not making any special adjustments. If it's allowable, it's allowable. If it's not, it's not. And we can let it stand on its own merit.
Okay.
Thank you.
So noted. Are there any other questions from the board? Seeing none, would someone like to make a motion?
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Stanley.
This is Mr. Thomas.
Oh, Mr. Thomas, I'm sorry.
Thank you. I move that after giving reasoned consideration to the information contained in the staff report and information received during the public hearing, the Washoe County Board of Adjustment approve with amended conditions to include adjustments to allow grading material to remain on site in compliance with Washoe County Code. Special use permit case number WSUP 21-0003 for Jimmy and Marana Cooper Family Trust, having made all 5 findings in accordance with the Washoe County Code section 110.8 810.30, that being consistency, improvements, site suitability, issuance not detrimental, and effects on a military installation.
Madam Chair, I would
Yes.
second that. I
Great.
would second that motion.
Stanley, Mr. Stanley seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time, board.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
You're welcome. Okay, now we're on chair and board items. Item number 9. Are there any future agenda items we need to know about, Trevor? Or do we need to do anything with that? No? Are there any requests for information from staff? What about, when are we going to be able to meet again? Does anybody know?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good question, and that comes up quite a bit also with the Planning Commission. At this time, we're still status quo for the next foreseeable future, probably the next few months before we raise the issue again. I hope, my hope is that soon, or maybe by this summer, we can meet again in chambers. But for the time being, we're still going to be holding these meetings via Zoom.
Okay, thank you.
Good shot.
For Director and Legal Counsel items, is there any report on previous Board of Adjustment items?
Yes, there is. You may remember the revocation request that came before the this board. That was the De La Luz special events operation. That was heard by the county commission at the March 23rd meeting, and it was revoked at that time.
Okay, very good.
That's all I have.
Okay. Any legal information and updates, Jen?
Mr. Large has not provided me with any legal updates to pass along, so nothing from me.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right, Madam Chair.
Yes?
I did want to introduce our newest staff member, if I could introduce Lacey Kerfoot, and I believe she's sitting with Donna. There she is.
Hi, Lacey.
She will be assisting with the administrative duties, and we're thrilled to have her.
Okay, you guys are actually in Building A? Donna?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Is she a planner or just admin?
She's she's with administrative staff.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Any public comment, Madam Secretary?
I have no public comment.
Okay, well, I'm sorry for the loss of contact for a while there, but hopefully that doesn't happen again. I don't know what happened. Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you very much for attending.
Thank you.
Thank you all.